to support claims that the country was used for terrorist training.
Now we move on to UK. Britain's health minister has said that it is important to hold the BBC to high standards after US President Donald Trump filed a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against the broadcaster. Wes Streeting has said that the BBC's editing of a speech Trump made on 6 January was wrong and misrepresented what the president said. Trump alleges the edited clips made it appear he encouraged supporters to storm the U.S. Capitol, in accusations he strongly denies. The lawsuit claims defamation and violations of U.S. trade practice laws, seeking at least $10 billion in damages. The BBC has said it will defend the case. The broadcaster has already apologized, admitting an error of judgment, but insists there is no legal basis for the lawsuit. Let's listen into what Wes Streeting has shared.
The BBC is one of the most trusted news sources, not just in this country, but the world over. And in corners of the world where democracy is threatened and tyranny thrives, it is the BBC World Service that provides that free, independent, high-quality journalism that otherwise would not be available. And that's why it's important to hold the BBC to high standards, and why when the BBC falls short of those high standards, they're accountable.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now looking at this, how should governments, balance holding media organizations like BBC accountable now with protecting press freedom, especially in cases involving such high-profile political figures like leader of another nation, in this case Trump? Do you think apologizing is sufficient?
We spend time this.
Well, apologies might not be sufficient. Just giving Donald Trump an apology is not going to cause him to drop the litigation. If the BBC wants the litigation to conclude, they're going to have to offer up a settlement, just like several other American media outlets settled with Donald Trump by paying him a substantial amount of cash. Of course, that amount of cash is far less than President Trump initially asked for in that litigation. But there is a more broader issue here, and that is the standards that media like BBC actually adhere to. And it's one thing to talk about what their internal policies are and what they hope to achieve in their reporting, and that they're neutral and all those nice things. But there are media organizations with a pattern of not just biased reporting, but flawed reporting, incorrect facts, things like that. The BBC, frankly, has had a number of scandals in recent decades related to some of their on-air personalities, as well as things that go on behind the scenes. This is clearly an organization with a credibility crisis, and they have to admit that and try and figure out how to save this organization, because frankly its reputation is not what it used to be. And any state broadcaster, even in the Western democracies, where many of the governments do actually own and operate media outlets, they all face those concerns about political interference and biased reporting as well. But when it comes to the BBC, there clearly is a pattern of problems that, despite every time an issue arises, the politicians and who's ever in charge of the BBC at the moment says we're going to fix it, they apparently cannot.
Yes, and what are the potential political and diplomatic implications of now U.S. President suing a foreign public broadcaster, BBC?
That's a really good question, because Prime Minister Starmer has actually developed a pretty good working relationship with President Trump, notwithstanding that President Trump is right of center and Starmer is left of center. So ideologically, they're starting from two very, very different places, and they don't agree on a lot of social issues, for example, or on green energy and climate change as another example. But it seems that they have a good relationship so far, and they've been able to negotiate on trade specifically. But President Trump is going to look at the BBC as an arm of the British government, and the guy in charge of the British government is Prime Minister Starmer. So we should watch closely whether or not there will be a breakdown in the relationship between the two leaders. Also keeping in mind that Prime Minister Starmer's poll ratings are atrocious. And President Trump knows that. So President Trump is certainly not shy about criticizing other leaders or media outlets whose ratings are falling, whose popularity is falling. So is President Trump going to become a vocal critic of Prime Minister Starmer as a result of this incident and this lawsuit is definitely something to monitor.
Yes, indeed. We will be eyeing that. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Ross Feingold for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news.